Okay, welcome everyone to the Canarian meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Mossy and I am an alcoholic.
My name is Mick, and I'm also serving as a secretary, and I am an alcoholic.
Please join us for a moment's silence to remember the still suffering alcoholic both inside and outside the room. Nadia is going to do the preamble for us.
Thank you, Mossy. My name is Nadia and I'm an alcoholic. Alcoholic Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. AA has no dues or fees. It is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Thank you for letting me do service.
Thank you, Nadia. A very warm welcome goes out to any newcomers or anyone returning to Alcoholics Anonymous.
The chat is now disabled until the end of the meeting, except for the meeting hosts. And at that, we're going to introduce our speaker. Richard is not far off, if you can stay sober a few more weeks, 40 years sobriety. We heard this part of his story there the other day. Today he's going to speak for about 50 minutes. Whatever you like, Richard. If you've kissed the Blarney Stone, just keep going on until everybody leaves, whatever works for you. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Muzzy. I'm Richard. I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic. Happy to be here today. Thank you for the invitation. I will apologize in advance to those who heard my recent share, I believe connected to this group. The short version, when you put in as many 24 hours as I have, it's hard to put your experience, strength, and hope into a 15 or a 20-minute share. So I got through the first day of my recovery during my last share. So I'll try to break it up today into maybe decades, because it seems that each one of those decades has brought something new to my recovery. Before we started the meeting, I announced that my anniversary, my sobriety date is November the 1st, 1984. A day which will live in infamy, and a day that I will remember my entire life with utmost gratitude. I left the story after my first day of recovery, the short version of which was that I had drunk myself into a blackout just before my 40th birthday, and came out of that blackout and asked, I said, God, please help me. I can't do this anymore. And I've been coming around long enough to have heard that same surrender many, many times. There's something about how alcohol breaks a human being that is universal in many ways. The conclusion that in that moment of clarity that one has, which says, I can't do this anymore, please help me. That for me is defined as the ultimate surrender for any alcoholic. That is the moment with which you come to grips with your your mortality, and you realize that alcohol has switched from being a friend to the Grim Reaper knocking on your door. And in that moment of surrender, I had no idea what the world was going to look like after that moment. And so 3 hours later, when I went to lunch as a dry alcoholic, 3 or 4 hours drive from his last drink, and 3 hours from that moment of surrender, to have this woman in this Japanese restaurant that I was having a business lunch with say, "I've never seen you without a drink in your hand." And to have to admit that I was so toxic from alcohol that I couldn't even think about taking another drink was a real moment of humiliation for me. It was as if my main purpose in life had simply been pulled out from underneath me. And then she uttered the words, "Do you know that you don't have to hurt from alcohol anymore?" And hearing those prophetic words, I think I even sobered up more, because the revelation that she was talking about was something that I had never allowed myself to consider. My whole life, I had drunk with a passion to not feel, to not fear. And she was talking about basically giving up the one thing that I had been able to depend upon. And so when she said that, I looked at her quizzically, and I said, I'm not quite sure that I understand that. And she said, "I'll tell you what," she said, and she went ahead and broke her anonymity. And, we all have encountered the situation where you cross paths with a drunk, and you wonder whether it's the right time to break your anonymity, or whether it's time to just let them continue on their own path and find out for themselves. But she took it upon herself, with 2.5 years of recovery under her belt, to break her anonymity and tell me what it was like for her, and what it was like today. And then she proceeded to tell me that she was going to speak tonight, and maybe I would be interested in meeting her at this meeting. And I knew nothing about Alcoholics Anonymous. I took it on her advice that I should show up. I did. I showed up. I discovered in that moment of arrival, as I've described in previous shares, the people outside on November the 1st were dripping in mink. They were bejeweled. They had cashmere suits. They looked like they were going to some kind of a very, very upscale funeral, with the exception that they were laughing, and they were smoking, and they were having a good time. And I walked into that meeting, and I was shaking, and I was offered a cup of coffee, which I proceeded to spill down the front of my shirt. I sat down next to a scroll on the wall. I looked to my right, and it was speaking about defects of character. And I could identify with defects of character. Karen, the speaker, was a short 5-foot blonde. She was in a very, very high position at the world's largest architectural firm. And she started to tell stories about scientific research that had been done with 100 white rats, and where they had been given and fed unlimited quantities of alcohol, and that out of the 100, 15 of them drank themselves to death, and the other 85 couldn't care less about the alcohol. And what she was inferring in relating that story about the experiment was that humans are divided into two classes, those who can drink safely and those who can't. And I immediately put myself into the class of those who could not drink safely. And the writing was on the wall. I had months earlier begun hallucinating. I had been seeing things that, of course, were not there, hearing things that weren't there. I was physically in horrible shape. And it occurred to me after going to this meeting, I left with one thing that I did not enter that meeting with, and it's called hope. There was some message that took place within that hour-long meeting. And it started with the kindness at the front door and the cup of coffee. It proceeded to provide an explanation that I was not insane, that in fact I had a disease, that in fact this disease was incurable, but that it was arrestable. That knowledge, that absolute critical knowledge for an alcoholic who questions whether they can ever drink again, whether they can have, oh, just one, became for me a fact of life in that first meeting, that I could never drink safely ever again. I had crossed over into the realm, and my sponsor used to characterize it. He would say, look, Richard, he said, just think of yourself as a cucumber who's been pickled. And he said, once a pickle, you're never a cucumber again. And if you think about that, there is no going back. Once you've admitted the fact that you're an alcoholic and you realize that it's the first drink that gets you drunk, you cannot backpedal that. You cannot get that thought out of your brain. Now, you can move into a state of denial, which is available to all of us. But that form of denial is only fraught with a number of outcomes that alcoholics have to deal with on a regular basis. One is, if I continue drinking with that knowledge, that I have three possible outcomes. One is incarceration. One is institutionalization. And the other is death, be it a slow death or a fast death. And I walked out of that meeting convinced that if I drank again, I had no idea whether it was going to be one of the three, which version it was going to be, but I had no problem accepting the fact that I was going to die. And so that's a heavy load to walk away from your first AA meeting with. I was fortunate. I got a message in that first meeting, and I was ready for it. I got an answer to many, many questions that I had posed to myself, that even friends of mine, drinking friends of mine, had posed, and who said to me that I don't know what the problem is, but I can't stop drinking. And I will relate one of those tales. A friend of mine, I was drinking bloody Black Russians in the morning for breakfast, and I had awakened, and was standing out on the front lawn, and he drove over with a few cases of beer in the back of his truck. And we sat down on the front lawn in the middle of the summer, and he related a story about he and his girlfriend and his girlfriend's son, who was young at the time, 10 or 11. And they had been drinking round the clock, and they were driving down this road, and they got into an accident, and the rear view mirror had broken loose in the accident, and the post that holds it to the glass had come crashing through this young boy's eye and impaled him on it, bleeding, blind, and on his way to sure death in the hospital. And he sat there. This had only happened a few days before, and he was still drinking. And he said to me, he said, "I don't understand what happened." And I was still drinking, so I didn't think that alcohol had anything to do with this. And then he pulled out from his pocket a particularly unusual letter. His girlfriend, upon recovering from that accident a few days earlier, had decided to go to her first AA meeting. And she had written Jim this letter, which said, "Jim, I said, I'm never going to be able to be with you again. I have joined Alcoholics Anonymous. I think I've discovered the root of my problem. And it's with a heavy heart, but I cannot ever see you again. And for the sake of my life and yours, and perhaps what's left of my son, who is still clinging to life in the hospital," he said, "I will not drink again." And he read this letter to me. Now, you have to understand, this was years before I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. And she said, "I cannot see you again. I cannot be around you again. And I have decided to join Alcoholics Anonymous, where I find refuge." And, you know, that message is the only message of Alcoholics Anonymous that I ever received prior to coming into Alcoholics Anonymous. And I completely blacked it out of my consciousness. And it wasn't until I got sober and I had several months under my belt that it came back to me that this message had been given to me. God had given me this message a long time before, and I was just not ready to hear it. And so what do they say? They say, you know, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And whatever stars that needed to be aligned in my life needed to be aligned on that day, on that 1st of November, 1984, were there. So I proceeded to begin a program of recovery in New York City, in Manhattan. I do have to say that I was blessed with the fact that, you know, there are thousands and thousands of meetings, that I had discovered someone who cared enough about me to take me to a lot of meetings in those early days. And I remember the fact that I went to this Thursday meeting, the one where I was volunteered for service, and I would go in every Thursday, and they had a greeter. And the greeter would say to me, have you done your 4th step yet?" Now, some people would take great offense at that, and I was among them. I took great offense at being asked every Thursday when I arrived at that meeting, had I done my 4th step yet? And I would say, "No, goddammit, I have not done my 4th step yet. Is it any business of yours?" And finally, after months of doing this, I got so pissed off that I went to my country house, I took a pad of paper, actually several pads of legal paper, and a box of pens, and I built a fire, and I did my fucking fourth step. I just had it with her. And wouldn't you know, that Thursday I came into that meeting and I walked up that step and I was proud as punch. And I said, she said, have you done your fourth step yet? And I said, yes, God damn it. Here it is. You know, and I had this sheaf of papers and shook it in her face. And you know what? It's exactly what I needed to get my fourth step done. I would have procrastinated for another 5 years. She pissed me off so much that I developed a resentment. And I had to put the resentment on my fourth step list at the top of the list. I said, I am so pissed that I have to do this fourth step, and I don't know whether I'm ever going to get over it. And because here it was, what did it bring up in me? I don't like being told what to do. I don't like following rules and regulations. I don't even like the suggestion of rules and regulations. Don't give me any of that horseshit. I don't do rules and regulations. Well, now my sponsor said to me, this is where it really got sticky, because he said, you know, you can't sit on that thing. He said, if you sit on it, you're liable to drink on it. He said, there's so much shit in that fourth step, you've got to get rid of it. So I said, okay, you come to my office, and that night we'll do the, we'll do the fifth step. And I said, wow, you know, I've committed now to sharing my deepest and darkest secrets. I've never done this with anyone. There are things that I had done in my life that I said, I'm taken to the grave. I'm not ever going to mention this shit to anybody. I said, I'm liable to be incarcerated, you know, I mean, so the fear index was off the chart. So as God would have it, he planned this night perfectly. He started this gigantic thunderstorm. He had lightning going on. He had thunder. He had rain by the bucketfuls coming down. And I'm looking out the window and I'm saying, whoa, you know, this is going to be heavy. You know, so I start in, and my sponsor's sharing his shit along with me, and back and forth we're going, you know, and I got finished with it. And he said, you see, it's really not so bad. And I came to this conclusion that no matter what I had done, is that it was not life-threatening. I had not murdered anybody. I mean, I came close to it, but I had not murdered anyone. I had done some pretty disgusting things, and I had a lot of shame that I carried forward to that point. Shame that probably helped to fuel my alcoholism, but it was behind me. So as we finished and we wrapped it up, he said, you can burn your fourth step now. And wouldn't you know that the thunder stopped, the rain stopped, the evening cleared up. And I got out of my office and I walked to my car, and I felt like the weight of the world had been lifted off of my shoulders. So what do we know from that experience? The only thing my pea brain takes away from that experience is that we are as sick as our secrets. And there is a good reason for shedding that kind of shameful and guilt-laden stuff with another human being. My higher power already knows about this stuff, but the transactional part of sharing secrets like that with another human being means that you have, for the first time in your life, trusted somebody else. And for an alcoholic to trust somebody is earth-shattering stuff, because it's the last thing on my list of possibilities of rehabilitation that would have ever occurred to me, is to trust another human being with a secret of that magnitude or secrets of that magnitude. So I walked away from that night feeling lighter than air, cleaner than a load of white laundry, and feeling like I had left shame and guilt behind me, that the slate was clear, and that what I could do was I could begin to live my life anew. You know, they talk about a conversion of sorts, a transformation of sorts, a miraculous intervention of sorts. All of those things seem to take place, at least for me, on the fifth step. So that's where the work begins, though. You shed that self-centered guilt and shame and those resentments, and you get them behind you. And for the first time in your life, at least the first time in my life, I was able to start to do some repair work, some basic foundational work. And 6, I got rid of the defects of character. I asked to have them lifted. Were they all lifted? No. Sometimes maybe for an hour, sometimes maybe for a day, sometimes for a week. Many of them, if not all of them, have a tendency to pop their ugly heads back up again, depending on circumstances. But you know what? I asked to have them removed. There is something remarkable in the act of asking to have something done for you that you can't do yourself. Okay, it happened on that first night when I said, God, please help me. I can't do this anymore. Okay, that plea was answered. The next thing that was answered was the beginning of being able to ask for the defects of character to be lifted, even if only temporarily. Well, that slides you right into 7, and 7 is the shortcomings. Okay, so you deal with the defects because you don't want to drink again. I mean, those are the ones that if you don't address them, my sponsor used to say, the only constant in life is change. And you have to change everything in your life. If you don't change everything in your life, you are liable to drink again. So he said, we're going to start to work on changing these things that you have some ability to work on. Hence 6. 7, the defects now, when they're starting to be lifted, migrate into an area of just simply things that don't make your life very pleasant. And so, you know, those are defined as shortcomings. Well, that's a nice way of saying that, you know, you're not perfect. You have some flaws. You need to clean up some of your behaviors because you want to become a better human being to the rest of the world. You want to have relationships. Well, it's pretty hard to have relationships if you're holding on to a lot of the old stuff. So that's where the relationship part of living and the ultimate realization is that you are not perfect, and therefore humility has an opportunity to start to go to work in your life, and you realize, I realized that, you know, I was not the center of the universe anymore. I had been in this state of delusion that I was responsible for everything, and that I could control everything. Little did I know I couldn't control shit, and that I had no capacity to do much of anything. Here's how big and inflated my ego was before I came into recovery. The weather report would come out in the morning on television before I left my house. Heavy thunderstorms, rain all day, maybe 3 inches. I'd say, who the fuck needs an umbrella? You know, I'll walk out the door and the rain's going to stop. You know, so I never carried an umbrella. I had a closet full of them, but I never carried an umbrella because I thought I could control the weather. Okay. So we got rid of that one pretty quickly, you know, the first big downpour, and I found out I was not impervious to the weather. Anyway, long story short, making a list of the people I had harmed seemed to be one of the most daunting challenges that I had ever encountered in my life. I said, oh my God, I don't have enough pages in this notebook. How am I going to ever deal with this? Sponsor said to me, he said, look, he said, start with the family, start with the worst ones, start with the ones that you've really screwed over badly, you know, that you cross the street to avoid if you see them coming in the other direction. Take care of those first. The rest will sort of present themselves. So the sidebar story on those will present themselves happened to me in the most curious way. I'm celebrating my 10th year anniversary. And remember, I did that 4th step a long time ago, 10 years before. I had done my 8th step, put the list together, burned it into my brain. So now I've got a list that I'm walking around with. I'm actually crossing the paths with people that I have owed an amend to, did the amend, and thank God it was behind me. Okay? They had been identified. So I'm sitting in a meeting. This is so odd because I grew up in a little tiny agricultural town, upstate New York, of 2,500 people. They had a beautiful old 1700 stone library. And that's where the AA meeting ended up being. I came back after 10 years of recovery, visited my mother, went to an AA meeting. I'm in the front row because I always sit in the front row. And I hear someone go, my name is Claudia, and I'm here for my first AA meeting. Well, this is a girl at 17 years old that I had gotten pregnant when I was a freshman in college. This was a girl whose family had said to my family, his shadow will never cross our doorstep ever again. This is a girl that I had dated all through high school, taken to my senior prom. This is someone I had loved deeply. And instantly, my relationship with her was terminated with the knowledge that she was pregnant. She was Catholic. Her family was very strict. She was going to have the child. There was no abortion that was ever going to be considered. And I continued on with my life from a freshman in college to now, when I was 10 years sober, so that means I'm 50 years old. So from 17 years old to 50 years old, I have carried this guilt and this shame with me that whole time. Now, she was on my 8th step list. She was right near the top. And she decided that after her first 30 minutes of AA, that she didn't think that she could stay around for the rest of the meeting, and she left, and I chased after her. And I made my amends to that woman. All those years later, we sat in my car, we cried, we hugged each other. And what she said to me was, Richard, she said, we were young and foolish. Chillingly relieved me of the shame in that moment. If I had not put her on my 8-step list, I would not have been prepared for that moment. I cannot emphasize enough the value of the preparation to do the amend. If you don't put them on your 8-step list, the likelihood of them slipping through the cracks is enormous. And especially the ones that are difficult. I've done a few more like that in my life, nothing with quite so much profound impact on my psyche as this one, but it was done and it was behind me. And so when you make the amends in 9, I took a different, I was taught early on in my recovery that to say you're sorry is meaningless, and that the only thing that holds water is for you to have recognized what you did, what character flaw you have, and to change it so that it doesn't happen again. Okay, that's meaningful change. That is the whole intent in my mind of step 9. If I can't change my behavior from something that's despicable or esteemable, then I have missed the point of step 9. And lastly, you do the work 4, 5, 6, 7, get to 8 and 9. That's where the reparations take place. And finally, for the first time in my recovery, I was freed of what I call this psychological and this emotional baggage. I was able to look at myself and I was able to try to find some peace within. And I started to meditate, and I took up silent meditation. I took up working with a Buddhist nun who was extremely, extremely influential. A woman by the name of Pema Chodron. She altered my life. She changed my perceptions. She helped me develop a practice, the practice which I am imperfect at. But that opened a door at a point in my life where I began a process that lasted for over 15 years, where I meditated on a daily basis. I don't do that anymore. I do it as needed or as desired. I don't have a formal sitting practice like I used to. I don't go on silent retreats anymore. But I do practice meditation. And I have found that I fall into prayer in a very natural way with a higher power. And it doesn't mean sitting down or kneeling down. It doesn't mean anything. I could be in the shower. I could be washing dishes. I still prefer to wash dishes by hand, even though I have a dishwasher. I use it as a mindfulness practice. I went through a year of chronic pain where I thought I could never sleep again. I had to sit upright for a solid year in bed. There was no way. They were close to doing spinal surgery. They decided it was not going to work. And I finally was sent to a mindfulness clinic. And I spent a year in mindful meditation about chronic pain. And I was able to get through a year, and it finally lifted at the end of the year. So I had chosen not to take drugs and I will modify that by saying that, there's nothing wrong with taking drugs for a medical condition. I went to India for my partner's wedding, my business partner's wedding, and one of my bucket list items was to go on a tiger safari with my 200 millimeter camera and shoot pictures. And I went for 3 days, but I had to go into the tiger preserve twice a day. And here I am in that condition of chronic pain. And my doctor, who was an AA doctor, by the way, he prescribed me medication to make it through that 2-week trip. And so I in fact, during that 2 weeks, gave the medication to my wife. And I said, every time I ask for a pill, only give me half. And she dispensed half of whatever I asked for. And I was able to get through the 2-week period without getting addicted to the drugs. And, it's possible to deal with that. I've had some other situations with people that I've lived with that have to do with addiction. And that woman, that beautiful 5-foot-tall blonde with red high heel shoes that 12-stepped me into the program, ended up becoming addicted to migraine medication in her 8th year. And I discovered pockets full of pills, and I confronted her about it. And we had made a deal with our therapist that if either one of us couldn't stay sober, that the relationship was over. It was to be terminated because we were both alcoholics and drug addicts. And I kissed her goodbye. I left her with the house, the dogs, the art collection, and I moved to California. And I used to send her an anniversary card every year, announcing my anniversary at AA, thanking her, telling her how much gratitude I had for her intervening in my life. And in the 16th year, she said, please don't contact me anymore. I can't deal with the pain and the suffering. I haven't been able to get and stay sober from that point on, from my 8th year. And so I didn't contact her again. And what I will share with you was that Facebook is a particularly curious way of putting you in touch with people who you've sworn either never to get in touch with again, or who you're avoiding, or that you've chosen not to be in contact with. But I came across her profile, and she is hospitalized now with a neurodegenerative disease. And I got in touch with her, and she got in touch with me, and she said, I need to make an amend to you. And she made an amend to me just a year ago. And I will tell you one more sidebar, that my sister, when I was 2 years sober, said to me, she said, Richard, she said, something weird has happened to you. You've changed so much in the last 2 years. What's happened? So I proceeded to break my anonymity to her and tell her that I had gone into AA. And she said, you used to be the most arrogant son of a bitch I have ever met in my life. And now you're really nice. What happened? And I said, well, I blame it all on AA because, and so she said, well, I'm gonna try it. And so here's the quick story. I'm getting down to about 3 minutes. And so I'm going to tell you one more story about her and how AA works. She was standing outside of her office reading from the 12 and 12, page 99, the St. Francis prayer. And she was reading from that while she was on the phone, streaming tears down her face, saying, oh, I get it now. she says, let me tell you what happened. And she was living upstate New York at the time. Albany is the capital of New York. She said, I'm going to go to a meeting, my first meeting. And so she drove down to the meeting address and she drove around the block and she came across it. Oh my God, look at that. There's a parking space right in front of the meeting door. And then she said, well, she said, I'm going to go around the block again because, I'm not sure that I really getting a sign that I should go to this meeting. If God wants me to go to this meeting, that parking space will be there when I come around the block again. So she comes around the block again. And damn it, if that parking space isn't still there, she says, shit, that parking space is still there. I guess they want me to go to that meeting. I'll tell you what, I'll make another deal. If this parking place is still there, after I go around the block, again, I'll go to my first AA meeting. So, of course, she goes around the block. The space is still there. She parks and she goes to her first AA meeting. Now, there are never any parking spaces in Albany, New York. You have to understand that this was an aberration around parking spaces, that she was defying her higher power. She was saying, show me, prove to me that I've got to go to my first AA meeting. And he said, I'll prove to you, I'm going to make sure this parking space is still there. And so she recounts this story. She's celebrating 30 some odd years, in the next February. So the program does work, if you work it. And somebody just said to me, how do you stay sober as long as you stayed sober? And I said, well, number one, you don't die. And number two, you don't take a drink. So, there's no big mystery here. There's no big mystery. We don't take the drink. We stay dry. If we do the step work, if we show up and we help other alcoholics, then we have a chance. We have a chance to pass it on. We have a chance to do service. We have a chance to make sure that what was so freely given to us, as it was given to me in that first day, we give back to others. We ensure the fact that Alcoholics Anonymous will continue and grow. And I was trying to do a piece of math the other day to think about how many times I have crossed paths with people and shared my message. And I did it on a train in New York City. This woman was weaving near the edge of the train as it came into Penn Station. I hopped on the train. I sat with her the whole way down to Philadelphia. And I broke my anonymity and I told her, I said, you don't have to hurt from alcohol anymore. Well, she just celebrated 37 years. So we never know how our message is going to impact someone's life. So we make the message, we pass the message on a regular basis. Anyway, I'm approaching 45 seconds to the end of my share today. I appreciate the opportunity to give you a piece of 40 years of recovery. These are just the highlights, just the tip of the iceberg. I want to tell you about what's happened once I moved to Portugal, because it was a wasteland for Alcoholics Anonymous. We started doing public information work. I chaired the first intergroup that Portugal has had. I am honored to be part of the process of growing AA in another country. And I will continue to do my part every day that I take a breath. I woke up on this side of the grass today. I am blessed. So thanks for letting me share.
Right. Thank you, Richard. You know, a fantastic share. So much I identified. You know, I said to my wife once, I suffered with a bad back, and I said to her, she had cancer, and used to give her the morphine and stuff like that, not diluted morphine. And one day I said to her, Sylv, is it all right if I have some of your Oromorph? Because my back's hurting me so much, and you know, and she said, no, Mick. She says, she was with a end of life group, and she said, no, but I will teach you how to meditate and get rid of the pain in your back. And we used to do that, and I didn't ever need that morphine or anything. I had an operation in the back in the end for my back, and they've rectified it, you know. And your story as you were going on, I identified with it so much. And today we've been up to see an older lady in this fellowship who's celebrating her birthday today. And we went out, and the little tables, there was 5 of us that we were on, was full of laughter, full of fun, and that. And what a beautiful gift I've been given to know you people that can keep me sober today by sharing your experience, strength, and hope. You know, and we're not finished yet, because we don't finish until the end, if we stay sober to the end of our lives. And as you were saying, you know, I don't know whether it was you who said about the pyramid of sponsorship, how it grows beneath you, how many people you actually affect by helping one person. And it's amazing. This program and you people in it that want to stay sober today, keep me sober. Just by saying, my name is Mick and I am an alcoholic, and I am willing to go to any lengths to stay sober today, just for today. And if I can't do today, I'll cut it down to a small portion of the day. God bless you. Mossy, would you like to talk?
Of course I would, Mick.
Of course you can.
Richard, thanks a million for that. Absolutely powerful share. One of the things that really hit home with me, for me, 4, 5, 8, and 9 are the magic steps. They allow me to look you straight in the eye. I love being sober. I love what Alcoholics Anonymous can do for you. And I really appreciate your story. You've moved me again, and that's why I do this. I do this service so that I can get something out of it, and I do. So I thank you for that today.
We've come to the end of the sharing part of the meeting, and Karen is going to do the promises.
Hi, I'm Karen. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you for letting me do service, and thank you to everyone. For thank you, Mossy and Mick. The AA promises. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. Feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? Think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen, and thanks everyone doing service. Thanks, Matthew, for screen sharing and all that. Kathleen for timer. thanks for joining me again today, Mick. You didn't screw it up too badly. So,
I tried my best.
the yellow card, who you see here,
What you hear here,
when you leave here,
let it stay here for the safety of the group.
that's it. And Richard, would you lead us out with the serenity prayer?
Sure, Richard, alcoholic. Okay, serenity prayer. God, grant me the
Just
serenity
the serenity
to accept the things that cannot
I
change,
cannot change.
the courage to change the
I
things
think
that
I
can,
can.
and the wisdom
Wisdom
to
to know
know
the
the
difference.
difference.
difference. Bless you. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Muzzy.